that believe that it.
Last year, I told you that I've
So
never
let's get out there and let's make some.
I want to thank Heath, Mayo, and Principals First for the opportunity to send a few brief words. Last year, I told you that I've never been more concerned about our nation's future. Today, I'm even more concerned, but I'm hopeful when I see groups like Principals First stepping up and joining the fight to defend the values that make our nation great. We cannot afford to just complain about the broken politics. We have to be willing to step up and to try to be part of the solution. That's why earlier this month, I announced my candidacy to serve Maryland in the United States Senate. And I wanted you to hear from me why I'm joining this fight. Thank you, God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. 50 years ago, my father, Maryland Congressman Larry Hogan Sr., made a very tough decision. He became the first Republican to come out for the impeachment of President Nixon. He put aside party politics and his own personal considerations, and he stepped up to do the right thing for Maryland and the nation. Today, Washington is completely broken because that kind of leadership, that kind of willingness to put country over party has become far too rare. My fellow Marylanders, you know me. For 8 years, we proved that the toxic politics that divide our nation need not divide our state. We overcame unprecedented challenges, cut taxes 8 years in a row, balanced the budget, and created a record surplus. And we did it all by finding common ground for the common good. Maryland is known as the state of middle temperament. We believe in common decency and common sense. Like the exhausted majority of Marylanders, I'm completely fed up with politics as usual. The politicians in Washington seem to be more interested in arguing than in actually getting anything done for the people they represent. Enough is enough. We can do so much better, but not if we keep electing the same kind of typical partisan politicians. Look, I don't come from the performative arts school of politics. I come from the get to work and get things done school, and I'll work with anyone who wants to do the people's business. Over 8 years just down the road from Washington, we have already shown a better path forward. And let's face it, one party alone can't fix it. We desperately need leaders willing to stand up to both parties, leaders that appreciate that no one of us has all the answers or all the power. Because this is not just about the differences between the right and the left. This is about the difference between right and wrong. And this isn't just your typical fight between Democrats and Republicans. It's more important than that. This is a fight for Maryland and America's future. And that is a fight worth fighting. And that is why I have made the decision to run for the United States Senate. Not to serve one party, but to try to be part of the solution to fix our nation's broken politics and fight for Maryland. That's exactly what I did as your governor, and it's exactly how I'll serve you in the United States Senate. Let's get back to work.
Dream that one day this nation will rise up live out the true meaning of its creed.
Too many people forget how special America is. We all have an obligation to work to keep it strong.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The most important people in American politics are the people in this room right now.
It's a room packed full of Americans who care about our country's core principles.
We must first be honest about what our nation is going through. And more important, give a damn about it.
The damage that Donald Trump has done to the rule of law is inestimable, but more importantly, it's irreparable.
He's going to make it a pro-Putin party.
We start by doing everything we possibly can to make sure that Donald Trump never gets near the Oval Office again.
That's why it is on us to do the hard things in this moment and push one more time.
We want to make sure that we really protect our constitutional republic, that everyone has the opportunity to vote, and we're going to make sure it's a fair and honest election.
What I did was what I was required to do by the Constitution, which was to uphold it. That's it.
It is up to all of us to show others to set the example and defend what's right, defend the truth, and in the end, defend our constitutional democracy.
The devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
Stay there. Sure. Son? Good evening and welcome to the very first Principals First Dinner. Give yourselves a big round of applause for attending. My name is Chris Roosen. I'm from Northville Township, Michigan, just across Haggerty Road, and I'm a volunteer with Principals First. Everyone associated with our group is a volunteer. Nobody is paid to be here, and most importantly, we're not asking for any more of your money. No one here is running for office, well, except for my re-election this year. But we don't want your checkbooks. We don't want your credit cards. We don't want your money. We just want you to see old friends, make new friends, find like-minded people who believe in the kind of things that we just saw in that video. I found out about Principals First about 4 years ago online when I started following Heath, Mayo, and the organization. I saw the pictures of their first summit meeting in Washington, D.C. prior to COVID. And I thought, you know, these people believe what I believe. I want to go to that. Well, I had to wait for COVID to subside. I attended in 2022, and it happened to be the same weekend Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. I found myself at a rally in Lafayette Square Park across the street from the White House with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And it obviously had a big effect on me. So I had a great time at the National Press Club. I went back the next year and volunteered because we outgrew the press club. I had to go to a larger venue. And then this year I attended my third summit, the one you just saw on the screen. And I met and interfaced with almost all the people that you saw in the video. So Heath asked us, what are we going to do besides have a summit once a year? We need to get out into this great big country and meet people who care about what's going to happen in the future of our country, because, and believe me, this video and what I'm about to say are probably as partisan as we're going to get tonight, or as political as we're going to get. We have two fellows running for president who are a combined age of about 160, and regardless of which one wins, we're going to have an 80-year-old lame duck president. So what Principals First is working on is what's next. How do we get back to the kind of beliefs that you see on our sign? I hope everyone read our principles as you were waiting for drinks tonight. So again, welcome. Update on the agenda. George Conway was advertised to speak. He had a family commitment and was not able to attend. So what you saw and heard of George on the screen just now, that's all it's going to be. But we've got a wonderful agenda for you tonight. I'm going to introduce the founder of Principals First, and he's going to kick it off. This is a young man that I'm incredibly impressed with because he didn't grow up with Reagan and Kemp and some of the others that I did, but somehow he found those really timeless truisms of conservatism and of Americanism. Heath Mayo grew up in Tyler, Texas, and he attended White House High School and excelled at sports. And a few years after he left those sports fields, a fellow named Patrick Mahomes joined those fields and went on to win 3 Super Bowls. Heath taught him everything he knows. Actually, I believe Heath's mother taught him everything he knows. She taught Patrick in, what grade was it? 4th grade. Heath's mom was Patrick Mahomes' 4th grade teacher, believe it or not. Heath left Texas and attended Brown University, where he pitched on the varsity baseball team. Upon graduation, entered law school at Yale University. Upon graduating from Yale, he went to Bain & Company and then left Bain to practice corporate law in Manhattan. He and his wife Cecilia, who's an attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice, presently live in the hometown of Frank Sinatra, Hoboken, New Jersey. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am really proud and excited to introduce Heath Mayo. Heath, come up and join us.
Well, thanks, Chris. This is just a lovely gathering, and it's great to see all of you here this evening. And hopefully, you know, in the conversations that you have, you'll take at least, if anything you take from tonight, hopefully you take a little bit of hope and optimism about, you know, even though this election year is going to be chaotic and frustrating on a number of dimensions, you know, I think the American people are always optimistic and hopeful, and you know, sooner or later we're going to start putting better folks in office and sending better folks to Washington that are going to really start to you know, move the needle. And some hopefully are even in this room tonight. We've got some elected officials in the rooms. Thank you for your service. Some even aren't elected, but they're, you know, public officials in their own right. We'll hear from election clerks, Michigan election clerks this evening, talking about how they, you know, these are just citizens who volunteered to step up and run our elections. Talking about how they do that. We're going to thrilled tonight to hear from Mr. Terry Virts, who we'll introduce a little bit later. But just a great evening of conversation. I hope to hear from all of you at some point. Hope for this to be collaborative. But look, principles first. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to look at our website. It's really surprised me. Like Chris said, we're completely volunteer run. So everything you see tonight, and I'll have them introduce themselves in a second. We've got some Principles First volunteer leaders from around the country who help kind of just set all this up and get it going. But it really is a team effort, and we want to get to know you, and we want to meet you and understand what, you know, your concerns are for the country and how we can make it better, because if nobody does it, it's not going to get done. It's up to each of us to make that difference, or else it's going to be somebody else that doesn't share our values. And I think that's the key thing that has brought us together. Just a little bit on the origin of Principles First. Some of you might be wondering we've been around for about 4 years now, I think, Chris. We started in 2019 as a response to the Conservative Political Action Conference. If any of you are familiar, it's called CPAC. It was started in about 1974, actually, in the years of Reagan and William F. Buckley, sort of in the early days of the, you know, intellectual conservative movement, rooted in ideas of limited government, the rule of law, that the Constitution mattered. But in recent years, particularly around 2018, 2019, I mean, I had gone forever. I was, you know, college was Republican, was a Romney guy, Rubio, and I always went, and it was always a great place to kind of hear what conservatives were thinking, and it wasn't sort of groupthink. You had libertarians, you had scholars and intellectuals, you also had political leaders that would get together and talk about the big ideas and challenges, and it's just not that anymore. It's not that. It's like our politics have become, it's personality driven. It's people getting on a stage to entertain you or shock you with the latest outrageous thing that they've seen. You know, just the other day, I think it was, you know, there was some kind of shouting match in one of the congressional committees between, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC. I mean, they were, and it wasn't, I don't even know that this is when you know it's bad. All I know is that they had this drop-down fight about their physical appearances between each other. I don't know what the committee was about. I don't know what policy they were debating. I don't know any of that. All the country knows is this embarrassing display of sort of schoolyard bullying, and that right there, I think, encapsulates everything that frustrates the people in Principles First about our politics today. I think that really crystallizes what we're trying to change. We've started to try to change that with the summit every year, and I think if you take one thing away from this evening, please, 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 if you can, get to DC in February to join us for that summit you saw. It's one of the most powerful things. I mean, I'm just so blessed to be a part of it, that we stumbled into it. It's just a great gathering of 600-800 people. I can't even remember now. It's grown so big where it's 2 days. We get a hotel conference room and just talk about the challenges facing the country. We don't pay any of the speakers. They show up on their own dime, and it's just a great. I've just met met Chris, obviously. Mike Beck, who you'll hear from, and actually, why don't we do that? I'd like to introduce just a few people, just so that you kind of get a sense for who is Principles First. Ravi Campbell, I don't know if you want to say a few words. He is our events chair, so he's in large part responsible for how these dinners go. Ravi, I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself, where you're from, and how you got involved. You can come up here. Here you go. Yeah, give it up for Ravi.
Hello. Hey guys, I'm Ravi Campbell from Brooklyn, New York. I hate public speaking and I hate politics, and now I'm speaking in public at a political, I don't know. And I asked myself, how did I get here? And how I got here was I kept looking at the TV, seeing terrible news, and I kept waiting for leadership. I kept waiting for a leader. And I was waiting, and I was waiting, and I was waiting. And then I have my beautiful son right here today. And I always tell him, you can't complain about your situation unless you try to do something to fix it. It's just common sense. So trying to lead by example, I decided there's no leaders coming, so not that I'm a leader, but I have to be a leader. We all have to be leaders. We have to do it because no one else is going to do it for us. So that's why I'm here. Thank you for coming.
Mike, you want to come introduce yourself? Yeah, so Ravi is our events chair. He runs the dinners, helps with the summit, and then Michael Beck is our grassroots leader in terms of outreach and organization.
Thanks, Heath, and it's great to be in this great state of Michigan. My name's Michael Beck. I'm from the great state of New Jersey.
Yay.
The last time I said that was not the response I got, so I guess people from the Midwest, Heath, are just nice.
The trees are the right height, I hear? Or that's what Mitt Romney said about
yes.
the state.
Yes.
The trees are the right height here.
Anyway, just to welcome everyone here. It's terrific to be part of this movement. I've already met a bunch of you. Look to have some great conversations with you. The way I came to Principles First is I have 2 8-year-old boy-girl twins. And when I look at what I've experienced up until the past few years as a country and what's facing them, they have no idea. And so what they sometimes say is, why does Daddy go fly around the country to hang out with this guy Heath and Charlie and Chris and everyone? Is Daddy's saving the country. And I don't have a cape, but what I would say is that this is how we save the country. And we all can do a little part or a big part, but just us being here speaks volumes. So thank you very much. Looking forward to the program. Heath?
Thanks. And then Charlie. Is Charlie, you want to come just say hello? So Charlie is our outreach director and is currently working on kind of getting as many people as we can in these rooms.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Woo! Yeah. Go Bengals. My wife, Donna, is right over there. We drove up today. And, okay, so how did I come involved with Principles First was I remember the Trump's second impeachment, and Mitch McConnell got up and gave this beautiful speech about how Donald Trump was morally and practically responsible for the insurrection. But then he said, well, but I'm not going to impeach. I'm not going to find him guilty. And I thought, am I crazy? What is happening here? And so that weekend, I had a skiing accident and was laid up on the couch. And so I'm like Googling stuff. It's like, what's out there for people that think like me? And I found the Bulwark actually first, and Charlie Sykes and Sarah Longwell. If you don't know them, please look them up. And they had mentioned Principles First. And I'm like, oh, what's that about? So then I got on there, and I missed the first summit, but I made the second summit. And I went there, my wife and I was like, and it's like what Charlie Sykes says, yeah, I'm not the crazy one, right? We're not the crazy ones. We're the sane ones trying to do what we can to protect the Constitution, right? We're trying to protect the rule of law. And every little bit, I'm telling you, every little bit helps. On the way up here today, I called my uncle, who was Jewish, and because I wanted to ask him about Israel and Palestine and what his thoughts were on it. And we started talking, and he said, now what do you do, Charlie? And I was like, I was talking about Principles First. And by the time the conversation ended, he said, yeah, sign me up. Because I told him I'm the outreach guy. I'm the guy that maybe I hope to talk to some of you all. And we're the people that, call people and talk to people. And he goes, sign me up. I want to do this. He's 80, Elliot is 81, 82 now, but he said, I got to have a purpose, and that's going to be my purpose now. And so if you're looking to do something like that, if you want to get involved and you want a purpose, please reach out to us, because it's fun. It really is, and you really feel like you're doing something important. Every little bit counts, and so thanks.
Thanks, sir. Well, see, I don't even have to speak. I don't even know if I told you guys you were going to speak tonight, but that's pretty good. See, I'm not gonna keep going too much longer here, but it's a powerful bunch. I hope that's what you take away from tonight. I mean, the people that we bring together are just top-notch quality folks, and I've just met some great people that I will be forever blessed to know through the work that we've done here at Principles First so far. So the summit, this is our very first dinner, so I want to thank all of you for being here. This is the very first one. Yes, give yourself a round of applause. Sort of exceeded our wildest imaginations in terms of how many people can we put in a room in the middle of outside of Detroit, and here we are. We're going to continue to do these around the country. We've got one coming up in Charleston, South Carolina in June. For those of you who are going to be going to the RNC, we'll have an event at the RNC in Milwaukee the Wednesday of the RNC, just right outside the Fiserv Forum. So for Republicans who are Principles First, we'll be there and having, it'll be similar to this, the kind of the programming. And so, we're just trying to convene like-minded folks around the country as much as we can. And so with that, I will welcome Chris back to the stage. I just want to thank you again for being here. It's tremendous to see you all. I hope you enjoy the program. Thanks.
I was remiss. I forgot to introduce the elected officials that are here tonight and former elected officials. I'll go first. I'm Chris Roosen, and I'm a township trustee in the Charter Township of Northville, just across the street. My sister Cindy Jankowski is our township clerk. Wave, Cindy. Cindy was formerly president of the Northville School Board and is now our township clerk, and she's doing such a great job, she's actually running unopposed for re-election. Congratulations. My friend and campaign manager, the great Mayor Pro Tem of the city of Novi, Dave Stout, is here. David. I spent about 20 hours in a car with Dave late last year, driving to Brooklyn and back, Ravi, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction at the Barclays Center. We had an amazing time. And he got us home. He got us there and back safely. So we're going to do two more things. I'm going to host a panel discussion and then Q&A. This is an intimate setting. We're all friends here, so we're going to take questions and answers. And then we'll welcome Terry Virts to give the keynote speech. And he's actually got a slideshow. He's going to tell us all about the International Space Station, which he commanded. So we're quite excited to have him here. So at this time, I'd like to invite to the stage the great Tina Barton, former clerk from Oakland County, now a statewide and national elections expert working on election security and all other matters. If it has to do with elections, Tina's working on it. Welcome, Tina. I was connected with Tina through, I think, Susan Nash, the Livonia clerk, and I invited her to attend our summit last year, and she ended up moderating a panel with the governor of Maryland, the secretary of state of Arizona. It was amazing, and she's amazing, so thank you, Tina. Next, we have my longtime friend Jeff Timmer, former executive director of the Michigan Republican Party. Jeff now works for the Lincoln Project, as well as hosting a very popular political podcast here in Michigan, along with the former chair of the Michigan Democratic Party. I keep forgetting the name of the podcast. I think it's Only Murders in the Building, but I'm not sure. It's actually called The Republic If You Can Keep It, which I believe is a Jefferson quote, right? And the final member of our panel is Ron Zimmerman, who I just met tonight. Ron graciously decided to attend. Ron represents ranked choice voting. I told the guys from out of state, because our abbreviation for our state is MI, everything here is called blank my blank. And his group is called Rank My Vote. So welcome, Ron. Does everybody have a microphone? Okay, I've got one too. So, check. All right, let's start with you, Jeff. Jeff's got something interesting in the hopper that he's working on with, is it okay if I say it, my former Congressman Dave Trott, who wanted to attend tonight, but he's still down in Florida, in Naples till June 1st. This is something called fusion voting. Tell us about that, Jeff. Where to start?
Well, I'm trying to think of how to start this. There's certainly no doubt that we're fed up and frustrated with the nature of our politics. We're caught in a doom loop right now where elections are a binary choice. There are one of two people who are going to win the election, whether it's the presidency or virtually any other office that matters. Right now we have, I'm not going to even pretend that this is a both sides problem. We have one party that is way out of whack, and that's my former party, that is now turned into a anti-democracy with a small d movement instead of a political party. What's going to change that? That's been the question for the last 8 years, right? That many of us have asked. What is going to change this? It's not just going to change with Donald Trump loss in November. It's going to take, I say pain is going to be the only teacher that's going to school the political right and set a sane, stable, center-right faction back as a force in our politics. We just don't have that right now. And that's a long way of answering Chris's question. There's an old, the solution, the new solution might be something that's old. In this, I don't want to sell this as a solution. This is one aspect, one thing that we can do to start to, I think, leverage sanity. Call it the center right, the center left. Our politics are played between the 40-yard lines historically. It's fusion voting. Fusion voting is something where more than one party can nominate the same candidate. It takes minor parties and allows them to, rather than be a spoiler, to cross-endorse candidates who meet certain criteria of whatever that party may support, and leverage the 2% or 5% or 10% or 20% of the vote that exists available for these smaller parties to then add to their totals from one of the major parties. New York and Connecticut have used this forever. Michigan used to use it. More than 40 states used to have fusion voting. Most states have outlawed fusion voting because the major parties wanted to exert their dominance.
So Jeff.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that this is something that many people in the room may know about and recall that I believe it was in the early 60s, William F. Buckley was frustrated with the Rockefeller Republicans in New York.
Yep.
He was a conservative, kind of pre-Goldwater, and he said, you know what, guys, I'm going to start the Conservative Party of New York.
That's
and he
exactly
did.
right.
And I believe they're still on the ballot.
They are, and they've made a difference.
Right, because you think of New York as this giant Democratic blue state, right? Well, how did George Pataki win? How does any Republican win in New York? I believe they go to the Conservative Party and say, hey, I'd like to be your nominee. I don't want you guys to be the spoiler. I want you to team with me.
Yep.
And so if a person votes, maybe they just don't feel comfortable voting Republican, or maybe they're so conservative they just want to vote for all the people on the Conservative Party.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Fusion voting enabled George Pataki to beat Mario Cuomo back in 1994. Ronald Reagan, in his 49-state sweep over Walter Mondale, won the state of New York, not as a Republican. He won it with the adding the votes together he got as a Republican, which were fewer than Mondale got as a Democrat. But when you added the Conservative Party and the Taxpayer Party of New York that had also endorsed Ronald Reagan, he went on to win the state of New York. John Kennedy wouldn't have beaten Richard Nixon in New York back in 1960 had it not been for Kennedy having received the Liberal Party of New York's nomination in addition to him being the Democratic nominee. So there's a history of minor parties leveraging their smaller support in turning that into something that matters. I mean, when the Conservative Party or the Taxpayer Party or the Liberal Party, or in Michigan, the new Common Sense Party that will be hopefully a factor in the 2026 elections, is able to say, look, we will support you, candidate, John, the Republican, or Jane, the Democrat. We're gonna evaluate which of you is closest to our principles. And right now, I can tell you the Common Sense Party in its nascent form has one principle. That's, will you support free and fair elections? Right now, the answer is not universally yes. It
So
simply
let's say
isn't.
I go to the polls and I don't like either guy running or either gal, if it's Gretchen Whitmer, and right now I have to vote Libertarian. And 4% of us, 5% of us vote Libertarian, and maybe we just steal the election from A and hand it to B.
Well, that's something that, what we have with minor parties historically, at least since the 1890s in Michigan when fusion voting was banned, is third parties are a spoiler. They're a place for a protest vote and nothing more. Their candidates aren't going to win the election. They're not going to win in the presidential race. The president is going to be either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and you have to choose between one of the two. A choice that's not one of those two is essentially a choice as well. And when you talk about the next summit in February, February of 2025 is going to be an interesting time. We're either going to have conquered for at least another 4 years this anti-democratic, anti-American movement that's happening in the country, or we won't. And so we're going to be in an interesting spot come next February.
So how's the progress so far? You said that you may be able to be on the ballot in 2026, which is obviously not a presidential election.
Right. The process that takes place for anybody can form a political party. To qualify for ballot access in Michigan, you need a percentage of the vote for governor in the last election. You effectively need 45,000 qualified voters signing a petition in order to qualify for ballot access. Say we do that, and we plan to. The Common Sense Party is going to go out and qualify for ballot access. We couldn't support a candidate who was nominated by the Democrats or Republicans. Michigan's law currently prohibits that. And so what's next is going to be litigation to overturn Michigan's ban. It violates our right to assembly. It violates our right to free speech. It violates our right to select the candidates and nominate the candidates that most agree with us.
So your first step is the 45,000 signatures, and then you see litigation.
And then we seek litigation.
We'll
offer our nomination. We'll be told that you can't nominate that person. They're already been supported by the Democrats or Republicans.
I see.
Therein lies the
You
conflict.
know, I don't know how the Reform Party got on the ballot, but, you know, I'm old enough to remember the first time that we went through this situation that we have today. I was a young engineer at Ford Motor Company, and a lot of the older guys were going to these Ross Perot rallies and telling me, he's the guy, he's the only one who can save us, and I'm voting for Ross. Well, you know, they kicked out George Bush, who, looking back, I think we tend to view our presidents in retrospect much better than we view them when we throw them out of office. So we ended up with Bill Clinton because of Perot. Now this year, I believe RFK Jr. just got ballot access on the Natural Law Party?
The Natural Law Party in Michigan. They held their convention in an office with 2 people. And nominated Bobby Kennedy Jr.
What do we think about the Libertarians? I know they've been taken over by this Mises Caucus, which is just like, I don't know, they seem to be a bunch of renegade college kids to me, like the Delta House or something. But is there some chance that their nominee will be Donald Trump?
No.
No, okay.
Well, no, because I mean that's not legal in virtually any state,
So
nor does Donald Trump adhere to any of the libertarian principles. And they do, whether you agree with them or not, they do tend to adhere strongly to those principles.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that. So I think maybe we'll end with Tina. So we'll go to Ron next. Ron, ranked choice voting. You know, I'm kind of a nerd, so I read up on these things and I follow what happens in other states. But maybe many of the people here don't know what it is, what it means. Can you tell us more?
Sure.
Start anywhere you want.
Yeah. There was about 10 leaders that were on the anti-gerrymandering effort happened about 6 years ago here in Michigan to get rid of gerrymandering. And, you know, we were all across the political spectrum. It was 2 libertarians. I'm a 25-year registered Republican myself, who's now an independent. We had Democrats. We had Bernie bros. We had people from all across the spectrum who came together and said, if you actually look at, one of the things I'd ask everyone here to look up is the American Anti-Corruption Act. I'm not sure if many people have heard of the American Anti-Corruption Act, but it's about 7 pillars about how we reform our processes to make them more responsive to the voter. Right? So get rid of gerrymandering, term limits, ranked choice voting, right? Sorry, now I'm blanking on all this stuff. Not you need to know this stuff. But ranked choice voting is one of those pillars. And the number one thing that ranked choice is after is to really get rid of the extremities in our politics, right? How do we tamper down the polarization? How do we elect more leaders who, while they might be principled one way or the other, are still want to get things done? And the way in which ranked choice accomplishes that is that in ranked choice voting, in order to win an election, you have to get 50% of the vote to win the election. In order to get 50% of the vote, there's no more 8 candidates. The winner gets 28%, which, by the way, 2016, Trump won the first 20 states, almost all of them except for one with less than 35% of the vote. 65% of conservatives did not want Trump. In fact, a lot of them were never, they even came out as never Trumpers. And the reason why ranked choice gets rid of that is that the problem with plurality voting that we have today is that it allows split voting. So you had the majority of conservatives in 2016 who felt, I'm moderate. They voted for Bush. They voted for Rubio. They voted for 65% of them voted for someone other than Donald Trump. But what happens is, when that majority gets split across multiple candidates, it allows those extreme candidates to win. And that's something that we have to change. Whether it's the version Maine uses, by the way, Maine has used ranked choice voting now for 6 years. Right. Negative campaigning in Maine has almost completely gone away because Maine truly is independent. Like when Maine, a lot of states say 40% people in our state are independent. In Maine, 40% are truly independent. They can't stand the polarization of the parties. So whether it's the version Maine implemented or the version that Alaska just implemented, which does ranked choice voting together with open primaries. So whichever flavor in Michigan, we're still trying to decide which flavor we want to go with. statewide. But the goal of both of those is to get rid of the extremities. So now when you have someone who Donald Trump in your state gets 35%, well, no one has a majority. So now what you start to doing, you start eliminating some of the bottom candidates from contention, and you look at their ballots and say, who did they vote for second? So in other words, if their candidate wasn't in the ballot, who would they have in the election? Who would they have voted for? And you keep redistributing the votes until you get someone to cross the 50% threshold. So that's pretty powerful. Even when I'm out in Kalamazoo and Ann Arbor, as a moderate conservative myself, I still walk door to door, and I don't, people describe ranked choice many different ways. I still describe it kind of with my roots, is that ranked choice holds you accountable. So when you have to get 50% of the vote, you can't be as extreme. You're not going to get a lot of voters voting for you second and third if you're off the deep end. So when you have to get a majority to win, that now makes you campaign to appeal to a much broader swath of the community to win the election, to get our 50%. No matter what candidate you are, if you really want to win, you have to appeal to a broader majority. And I always say this, most importantly, not just to win, but in ranked choice to get reelected, you need 50%. That's a higher bar. If you don't do what you said you were going to do when you campaigned and you got into office and we elected you, 50% is much easier to get your butt out of there and holds you accountable. So that's what I like about ranked choice, is the accountability of that 50% holds you accountable to what you do in office.
So as Jeff was saying, right now voting is binary. Do you want the chicken or the fish?
Yes.
There's no third choice. What this proposal is, my wife's a figure skater, so I believe I can compare it to figure skating judging. Now instead of a voter, I'm a judge. And I'm going to vote for gold, silver, bronze, right? And somehow, I guess, the computing equipment that we have all come to know so much about since 2020 will calculate, okay, let's say, and this is a real world example, I'm not making it up, congressional Democratic primary, and here in Detroit and Wayne County, there were 7 people running. Rashida Tlaib got 31% of the vote. All these other people canceled each other out. So Rashida's congressman representing tens and thousands of African American voters in Detroit, but she's not African American, and we know she's very extreme and is part of the squad, and none of us support that. So had there been ranked choice voting in that election, the voters would have said, well, I like this Detroiter first, and this Detroiter second, and this Detroiter third, right? And then Rashida would have fallen down to 4th or 5th.
Right, extreme candidates
Possibly.
have
We
a hard,
assume,
they have a hard time, extreme candidates have a hard time getting second and third place votes from any other candidates. And if you negative campaign, it even makes it worse to get second and third place votes.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do stupid negative campaigning on other candidates, they're not gonna vote for you second and third, so that's why negative campaigning goes down. So it's pretty powerful. The one thing I will say, and I use the Libertarians, the Libertarians invite me to their conference every year. So I think they're getting tired of seeing me. But one of the things I always say is that every state or city that's implemented across the US so far, they see turnout go up. That's a major metric about good elections, is are you getting people to turn out? The reason why turnout goes up with ranked choice is now those libertarians who are like, I can't stand any of the two, I may not even have a libertarian in the mix, now they start showing up. Because now they can actually cast their vote honestly. They can say, I don't have to not vote for the libertarian because I'm going to spoil the election. They actually vote for the libertarian, and then they vote for either the Dem or the Republican, whoever they think is the best leader, second or third. So you really get a lot more energy coming from third-party voters, because now they want to come out and vote because they have someone to vote for, and their vote matters, and their vote means something.
In this wonderful republic of ours of 50 states, we have open primary states, closed primary states, party registration states. Some nominate, with a caucus, as in Iowa, or a convention. We have elected positions that are partisan. We have some that are nonpartisan. Most of our large cities and even small cities, and I think maybe all of the cities in the state of Michigan, are nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to vote for the mayor of Detroit, you're voting for Mike Duggan. He's not on the Democrat line or the Republican line. What I believe is true is that ranked choice voting is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It would still be what each state desires that works with their existing political system. Am I correct?
That's absolutely correct, and that's what each state does a little bit different.
So if Michigan doesn't want to have, people voting for DR and Libertarian all on the same ballot, we could just keep it on the D side and keep it on the R side.
We could if we want, yeah.
We could. I want to just
John.
point out that the fusion voting, ranked choice voting, nonpartisan primaries, these aren't mutually exclusive reforms that we could be looking at. They're things that could all work together. The reason that attracted me to the fusion voting and why I was talking about that is it's something that can be accomplished with litigation. Ranked choice voting, nonpartisan primaries would take statutory change, or it would take a ballot initiative. And so, changing the Constitution. And so all of these things could happen. Some of them are more difficult to happen or to make happen than others.
So something else that interests me about ranked choice voting, I'm very curious about it. Like I haven't endorsed it, or I don't have my own plan at home that I open up, but in much of America, and certainly in Michigan, people have self-selected to live in an area with like-minded people. So we typically see elections in the city of Detroit and in parts of Wayne County are decided on primary day on the Democratic ballot. As I said, Rashida was the example. We see in the state legislature, our neighbors in Detroit, you'll see 10, 11, 12 people running in the Democratic primary, nobody running on the Republican side. And then in rural parts of the state, it's the opposite. The election is decided in the August primary among Republicans. So I'm very curious about, will this proposal bring the benefit that you're proposing, that the D's would get better candidates to represent us in Lansing and Washington, and the R's would get better candidates to represent us in Lansing and Washington?
Yeah, so our proposal, when we write the constitutional language, will be, and we're shooting for 2026 for this, our proposal would be that whatever office it would be mandated for, and right now, statewide, we're only looking at 4 or 5 offices. Like, we're not trying to implement this for dog catcher of XYZ city, right? So, but whatever office it is implemented for, it would apply to that office's primaries as well. Because to your point, a lot of the who determines the winner is determined in your primaries. Detroit, as an example, likes this because I don't know if you saw what District 13, what happened last cycle. They had 9 candidates run the Democratic primary. 8 were black, right? District 13 in Detroit is 73-point-something% black. They had 9 candidates run, 8 were black. Guess who won?
The other guy.
The only candidate that wasn't black, because what happened there has been happening in New York City. New York City implemented ranked choice voting for the same exact reason that Detroit had this last cycle, is that it splits the community vote. So you had the black vote split across 4 or 5 really pretty decent black candidates for that district seat. But it split that 73%, so the person with 27%, the only non-black ran in the race, wins the election. That's what ranked choice, I think that's the one benefit rank has over fusion, is that it gets rid of that split voting. We don't want majorities in a community split across multiple candidates and having the dissimilar candidate win. That's the root flaw of plurality voting that we have today.
So I hear from some of my Republican conservative friends, they dismiss this, they poo-poo it, or conservatives are against it, maybe Alex against it, maybe there's a group telling state legislators to be against this. Are you getting that feedback? Is it, are we
here in Michigan?
Are we so entrenched in our partisan silos right now that even this is now a partisan issue?
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think when you say, are we getting it from conservatives, I think we're getting it from the conservatives that we all here in the room are frustrated with, who say they're okay, I won't even go there. But yeah, I think so far, and we passed ranked choice now in 5 cities in Michigan. We are 5 for 5. So everywhere we put this on the ballot and we've educated the community, they voted for it. Now, those are 5 more liberal communities, right? So one of the things that we realize we need to do is we start thinking about a statewide initiative in 2026. We have to start getting in front of more audiences like this. Yes, I go to the Libertarian, and they invite me every year to talk a little bit more about it and where we're at. They love it. They use it. I don't know if you know that. Libertarians here in the state use it to elect their officials, ranked choice voting. But I need to start getting in front of more communities like this to start explaining how can this, when I see what we're talking about here and the challenges we're having with the extreme right, I mean, this is a great tool to get rid of extremes. So that's why whatever I can do to help educate you, going forward, I'd love to come and talk to whatever groups I can help to educate you on how that can help accomplish that.
If I'm not mistaken, Glenn Youngkin, the famous governor of Virginia, was nominated at a Republican state convention using ranked choice voting. He's governor today because Republicans at their own convention used that method to nominate him as the best person in, a very purple state leaning blue now.
And he walked the line, in the general with the MAGA and so on and so forth. But if you look at his history, very moderate, very moderate conservative, very reasonable.
Thank you, Ron. So Tina, we just had our first election using 9 days of early voting. I went to Northville Township Hall to see Cindy, and I walked in to vote early because I was going to be out of town. And in the lobby, it was set up as a precinct. They signed me in. I drew my ballot. I filled in one circle. I fed it into the machine myself. I went upstairs to the clerk's office, and they already knew I had voted. They said, we knew you were in the building. We saw you. But
they have alarms that go off when you walk in the building, actually, Chris.
I know. There's a long story behind that. But, I could have chosen to go directly to the clerk's office and pull an absentee ballot, and it would have taken me the same amount of time, but I would have put it in the envelope, given it back to them, and they would have had to wait until election day to open it. So what kind of feedback are you getting since our first experience?
So with the early voting, I think anytime you have something that's new in a state that is related to elections, obviously there is some adjustment time period, right? I think we saw that voters maybe weren't even fully aware of what their options were and weren't really sure of what to do or how to do it. So I think as we go on into the next election cycle of August and then November, you'll see that the turnout is going to increase even more because people will be more familiar with it. I think we also have to look at the presidential primary in Michigan. There wasn't a lot of excitement behind it, right? So you weren't driving a lot of high numbers in the presidential primary itself. I do think that people love the option. I think that people want options when it comes to voting. There are a lot of people who want to see it go through the machine. I have been around in the business long enough to remember when I was in Bloomfield Township that we always knew that whoever, that the Republicans were going to take the election through the absentees. Everybody voted absentee during those days. And now it has become taboo to vote absentee. So for those who are afraid of the absentee ballot, the early voting does give them the option to actually go in and see the process for themselves. So I think this will continue to catch on. I mean, this is a ballot proposal too, right, that passed in very high numbers, a ballot initiative. People in our state want options when it comes to voting, and they have spoken very loudly and clearly on these last few ballot initiatives that we've seen the last couple cycles.
Thank you. So going forward, there was recently a survey published by, I believe, the Barton Center of Elections Professionals around the country, and there were over 900 responses to this survey. And they were asked questions about the mood and the temperament that they're experiencing. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it was the Brennan Center. I'd
Brennan,
like to have
sorry,
their
it was a
money.
B.
I'd like to have their money, but I don't. So I work with a group that's called the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections. We are supported by 4 different organizations. The Brennan Center for Justice is one of those, obviously a left-leaning organization. Also R Street, which is a Republican conservative think tank. And then we have 2 nonpartisan Protect Democracy and the Elections Group, which I'm a part of. So the Brennan Center did just put out a survey that had some interesting results in there. And what I think it comes down to is it shows that election officials in our country are, they're understaffed. And I'll say that in a few ways. They're understaffed because people in our profession are walking away from the job. They're walking away. They're not high-paid positions. They are taking all kinds of grief on all levels. They have people calling them on a daily basis. Many of them are being threatened. We saw where just over the last 12 months, the number of election officials in our country that's been threatened has jumped from 25% up to 38% in just 1 year. People are walking away. It's a great resignation is happening across this country. I've been in 31 states in the last 21 months. And so I'm with election officials all the time. It is very common that the chief election administrator in counties, in localities, as well as in the state, over 50% of them will not have been the chief election administrator that ran elections in 2020. We're seeing that. We just saw a testimony from the Charleston County chief election official, and I said, you're going to Charleston, South Carolina. I'll be going there in July. But he just gave testimony, I believe, in front of the Oversight Committee, where he said that 70% of the election administrators in South Carolina will be new this election cycle. So they're understaffed. It's not just the chief election official, but we're also seeing concerns with the election inspectors, the poll workers. There's so much divisiveness in our country that they're concerned for their own safety. So that's causing a staffing problem. Again, it's not a high-paying position. They're underfunded. As part of that survey, we saw, too, that 83% of the election officials in this country said that if their budgets don't increase in the next 5 years, they are in deep trouble when it comes to this. That is a shame in our country when elections are considered critical infrastructure. It was deemed critical infrastructure in 2017. This country does not fund its elections as critical infrastructure, and we have got to do a better job at that. We can't put these demands on these clerks, on these election officials, and not fund them to do their jobs and do it properly. So not are they underfunded, understaffed, but they are also under attack. When you are hearing so many of them walking away, they're walking away because of threats. I, too, was threatened in 2020, November 2020, an individual threatened to kill me, kill my family. Luckily, I bring my husband with me, who would not be a pleasant person for you to meet after. This is an individual who threatened to kill me, my family, when we least expected, did not like the fact that I stood up after the November 2020 election and basically called BS on a lot of the rhetoric that was being put out there by the party that the election was stolen and it was fraudulent. I was a Republican on the ballot in 2020 for Oakland County Clerk. Me too. Yeah, and so I stood up, said that I did not believe that the election was stolen or it was fraudulent. That then brought the threats to me. This individual threatened to kill me, my family. Was charged and pled guilty in February of this year and will be sentenced in July of this year. My story is not unique, okay? I'm just very public about it. There are election officials across this country who their lives are being threatened, their families are being threatened. This is happening daily, weekly. They're being swatted, they're being doxxed. All of these things, it's happening. It is no wonder the true great resignation in this country is happening in the election profession, and it's a shame, and we have got to do better.
So, if you're able to, tell us about some of the recent training that you've been attending and presenting. As clerks are getting ready for this year's election, I'm hearing talk about tabletop exercises with the police department and the fire department because they're concerned that X, Y, and Z might happen on election day. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of scary news when it comes to elections, right? One of the great things that I will say is that over 90% of the election officials in this country that were surveyed, that responded, said that they have increased their security in processes as well as hardening their facilities. So that is really great news in our country. We've also seen this massive effort for transparency taking place, where election officials are inviting you in, they're showing you things, all of this. As part of the vice chair for the Committee on Safe and Secure Elections, I travel the country with a recently retired sheriff out of Larimer County, Colorado. We host and facilitate tabletop discussions where we invite in the election officials from either regionals or locals. They come in. They also bring in their local law enforcement, state law enforcement. I just came from Rhode Island this morning, caught a 5:30 a.m. flight to be here for my friend Chris. And we had DOJ, we had FBI, we had CISA, all at the table, the State Fusion Center, Hazmat, your facilities managers, the PIOs, your communications team, all coming together. And we're working through a lot of these scenarios that we're already seeing have happened across the country, but sitting down with them to say, what is your continuation of operation plan if this happens in your community? What is the chain of command that would happen if your chief election official is taken out because they open a letter in your office and it has fentanyl in it? Because if you're not aware, we have seen multiple cases in this country in the last 6 to 9 months where election officials have been sent an unknown substance, and several of those have tested positive for fentanyl. These are the types of attacks that they're under. We work through that. We talk through about what would happen if there's intimidation at the polling location. Lots of states are open carry states. How do we work through that? We present lots of different scenarios to them. They sit down with all of these team members and they're talking through them. This is very common for law enforcement to do this. It is not common for election officials to have done this. This is something really that's kind of new, being integrated across the country. Again, have been in over 30 states in the last 21 months, including Alaska and Hawaii, which is a tough gig, right? But I volunteered. And so we're working with election officials. Some of them in this room have sat through those tabletops themselves and talked about how scared they were. And you know what? I am there to scare you a little bit, because I'm there to scare you enough to make you be prepared. Because we don't know what 2024 is going to bring. What we saw happen after 2020 shocked our country. And if you weren't shocked by it, I'm not sure this is the group for you. I mean, Heath, you might feel differently. But if you weren't shocked by what you saw happen after the 2020 election and it didn't disturb you, then maybe this isn't, the place.
So my clerk, who's like a sister to me, Cindy Jankowski, attended this seminar. And she came back and shared with our police and fire chief and our director of public safety some of these concerns. And I'm very proud to say we believe we have the leading police and fire departments in the region, in Northville Township. This is something we've built over the course of 25 years. Just didn't just happen yesterday. And when she presented what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they were speechless and their jaws fell and they said, oh, we need to start planning for that. Because the kind of things that Tina just told us that have already happened, what if they happen on election day? Right. What if people are waiting for the absentee ballots to be counted and there's white powder in one of them? What if there's a cyber attack?
And some of those scenarios we're looking through too, we're talking about AI.
Right.
Every single major election cycle has some element to it that we did not face in the election cycle before. It just is what it is. 2020, we had the pandemic. Now we have, in this particular election cycle, AI. We don't know what that's going to look like. So we have a scenario where we work through where the clerk's voice is, digitally goes out and it sounds just like their voice. And so we use a scenario like that of how would you handle this if this were to happen in your community on election day? If you were to be swatted in your home, these are things that are happening. This has happened to multiple election officials across our country. Right now, it's happening more at a state level. But I can tell you that as we get closer to that November election, you're going to start seeing some of these things that are happening more in state offices are going to trickle down to the local level, because people always like to copycat, unfortunately. And that's what we're going to see.
We held a budget hearing last week, and our director of public safety put a video on the screen in front of us of Morgan Freeman, the actor. Maybe you've seen it. Looked like Morgan Freeman, sounded like Morgan Freeman. He was talking like Morgan Freeman, and he said, I'm not really Morgan Freeman, I'm AI. Will you believe anything and everything I say in this video? Well, I'm here to tell you that by election day, any one of us, whether you're a clerk or anyone, your voicemail greeting can be taken and fed into AI, and they can make you say anything. If you're on YouTube anywhere,
our country is really kind of ripe for this right now, right? Where there's so much divisiveness in the country, there's a lack of civility in the country, and so you have foreign, partners who are looking at ways that they can meddle in our elections. They don't have to send an army over here, folks. They can do things like this to increase the divisiveness, to intimidate, and to also cause confusion for voters. And they may be specifically targeting some particular precincts based on what they know the voter base is at that particular location. That's an intimidation factor, intentional.
Or maybe it's good old-fashioned cyber attack on election day, or power goes out and so on. So anyway, that was very enlightening. Thank you. Do we have microphones out here for Q&A, Heath? Okay, so if anybody has a question, we're going to take a few questions, then we're going to move on to Terry.
Thank you. I have a question for Jeff, and you alluded to referenced the Kennedy situation and the so-called convention of that party. Is there any word around, and of course you have your project with Mark Brewer, to try to contest that? I don't know, it just strikes me as unbelievably impossible that two people could get together and it's called a convention of a party that could put someone on the ballot that could affect and impact the decision in this state, which in turn could affect the decision for the country. How two people, that scenario. So the question is, are you aware of any legal challenge to that or any basis for that?
Yes. I don't think it's been announced yet or filed, but there will be a challenge filed to that, questioning the conduct of the proceedings, the so-called convention. I don't know. I guess I'm not overly optimistic that they're going to be successful. The law is a little. There's enough room here that what they did probably will end up going through. And you mentioned a lot of adjectives about what it was. Transactional was probably one of them too. And so if I think that's what it will take, would be evidence of financial impropriety involved in the nomination in order for it to come to fruition.
And then quickly and separately, Lincoln project this year?
Lincoln Project is focusing on the presidential election in 4 key states, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, turning out people who are disaffected, Republicans, center-right conservatives, who won't vote for Donald Trump, and trying to get them to complete the circuit and vote for Joe Biden again, whether or not they agree with him on policy or ideology or anything else. He's going to support democracy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you. There are proposals by some of the people in Mr. Timmer's former party to reform the election rules to require a hand count of the paper ballots. Could you address the consequences of that kind of a change and give us some ammo to use when we discuss that with people?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things to think about here is hand counting of ballots. If you think you're going to get more accuracy out of a bunch of humans counting the ballots, you are incorrect. If you've ever been at a recount before, and I know some of the people in this room are shaking their heads and chuckling, that is not the way to go, right? The humans make more mistakes than any of these machines are making, 100%. I stand behind that. Another part of this is the hand counting. When you talk about how many ballots you're going to have to count, the time that it costs to do that, as well as the chain of custody of those ballots in that type of a situation, and the cost. All of those things become astronomical. The error rate from humans, the cost of it, the time that it takes, all of those things would be astronomical.
So in Northville Township in 2020, we had a school board race that resulted in a tie. And we did a hand recount. It was during COVID. Some people came down with COVID. They did the county came into our township hall, did a hand recount, and after the recount, it was still tied. I believe each candidate picked up just a handful of votes, 3, 4, 5, that the machine just hadn't read.
And a lot of times when there's, and I know there are some election officials in the room if they want to correct me, but a lot of times when you're doing a recount, some of the rules are a little different when they're being done by hand than being done by the machine. So sometimes when you get a few anomaly of a vote here and a vote there, it's because of what the hand count rules are in the state.
But in Michigan, we have so much government and so many races that, our ballots are like bed sheets. So, not only would it be less accurate, but, how would you keep track of, every person running for dog catcher and Register of Deeds and Township Trustee and School Board? It would be incredible. as well as less accurate. Any more questions before we move on to Terry? Nobody? Well, thank you all.
Chris,
By the way,
Chris, can I say one thing?
Go ahead, Ron.
You know, I spent 30 years working in corporate, working with a lot of, Accenture and J&J, working with a lot of people who were motivated by money. I just want to say this. I don't know if many people know Tina's background and what she's done, and a lot of the clerks that are in the room. In the last 4 years, having left corporate and doing what I do now, learning a lot about how our elections work, we need to give a hand to the folks like Tina and the clerks for what they do. It's really amazing.
Really do.
Salt of the earth people, really awesome.
But thank you for that, because, by the way, I forgot to introduce the Deputy Clerk of Kent County. My friend Rob McComber is here. He's not elected. He's appointed. He works for Lisa Posthumous Lyons in Kent, and I thank him for making the drive over tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. That was fantastic. Thanks to all four of you. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome our keynote speaker this evening, and I'm going to plug him in here so he has his. Let me see. Mr. Terry Virts, and I'll welcome him to the stage in a minute, is a man of many hats and many talents. He was at our summit this year, and we're thrilled he was able to join us this evening here in Michigan. He's a pilot, an astronaut, an author, and a photographer, and some of the fruits of those photography skills we'll see this evening. He began his career as an Air Force officer and pilot, and he was stationed in Arizona, Florida, Georgia, South Korea, Germany, California, and Texas. So he's been around the world, above it, across it, you name it, he's probably been there. He's logged over 5,300 flight hours in more than 40 different aircraft, including combat time in the F-16 Viper. He's also served in multiple flying commands, Space Command, and Cyber Command. In 2010, he made his first space flight as pilot of the Space Shuttle Endeavour on mission STS-130, delivering the now famous cupola, which, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, but which provides astronauts with a 360-degree view of our planet and the universe. Virts attended Harvard Business School in the fall of 2011 and completed the General Management program, having been selected as NASA's only candidate for that program. In 2014, Terry Virts launched onboard Soyuz TMA-15M from Baikonur, Kazakhstan to the International Space Station. In March of the following year, Virts assumed command of the ISS as commander of Expedition 43. He spent 200 days in space. I think that's top of the list. It's up there in terms of the number of humans who have spent time in space. He's up there on the leaderboard for Expedition 42 and 43 flight, which is the fourth longest continuous NASA space mission. He's also one of only 4 astronauts ever to have piloted a space shuttle, flown on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft, performed spacewalks, and commanded the International Space Station. Virts has taken more photos from space than any other astronaut, and we'll see some of those photos tonight. His National Geographic book, View from Above, features the best of Terry's photographs along with his stories from space. He's a cinematographer, a scuba diver, he does the scuba diver stuff as well. We got a scuba diver group in the room this evening, and drone pilot. He also speaks Russian and French. He now lives in Houston with his family, and he's in the energy consulting space with Endeavor Energy Services. And we'll welcome Mr. Terry Virts to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much. I don't know where you got all that stuff from, Heath. It was at least 10% true. In the Air Force, that was our rule. If you were giving a speech, you had to be 10% true. Also, if you're giving a speech, they would have a bucket of ice. So whoever was talking had to put their hand in the bucket of ice. So we had really fast and funny talks in the Air Force. But they don't have that here today. So every good astronaut talk begins with launch. So I want to talk about, and it's kind of weird here, like the pictures will be over there, but I'm over here, so you can look at the pictures. I'm going to talk about my first launch back in 2010, and I'm a photographer. I was the kind of photographer my kids were like, Dad, stop taking pictures. So I snuck a camera out. Excuse me, I have this chronic cough. I'm going to be coughing all night. I'm not sick. Brought the camera out, got this picture of my crewmates looking up at the spaceship. But the trip to the launch pad starts about 4 or 5 miles away in crew quarters. It's the same crew quarters that Neil and Buzz got in their big white suits back during Apollo. Same government lighting and the same government chairs. We plug in these orange suits. We call these things the pumpkin suits. Went out. We got in something at the time. We called it the Astrovan. It was an Airstream trailer. Now when they're launching on SpaceX, they get in a Tesla truck, but we were in the Astrovan. There was a big crowd, maybe a couple hundred people cheering for us. We drove a few miles. At the end of the launch pad, there was a crowd. It was this size. You know, they cheer for us. Walking up to the launch pad itself, like around us in that picture, there's a bunch of guys standing there with machine guns. They look like Secret Service, typical men in black with their little earbuds, you know, standing there, not smiling. You go up the elevator, walk across that thing. It's called the 195-foot level. Get in the shuttle. There's one guy in there. He straps you in real tight, shakes your hand, goes down the elevator, and drives away as fast as he can. And then you go launch. And NASA had something called a post-flight. So you do your mission, you come back, and they would send you around. You go to Congress. I went to the White House several times, met several different presidents. Go to Boeing and Lockheed and small contractors. Every crew went and just shared the story. And as part of my crew's post-flight, we went back to the Kennedy Space Center to the security guys, those guys that were standing there with guns. So we gave them our talk, you know, our slideshow, and do you have any questions? And then after that, I said, all right, I have a question for you. Why are you guys out there with machine guns in the middle of Florida? Like, is Al-Qaeda hiding in the swamp, you know? And I'll never forget this. The guy looked at me with a totally straight face and said, no, sir, we're there to make sure you get on the shuttle. And I think, knowing what I know now, I think he was telling the truth. Because like he said, I'd flown a lot of different jets. You know, the F-16 is the best airplane ever made. I'd done a lot of things. And when you're laying there in the shuttle, and I remember when the engines lit up for the first time, I thought, man, something really significant's about to happen. And then boom, you go launch, there's vibration, like somebody's grabbing you, shaking you as hard as you can. The shuttle during launch gets up to 3 Gs, so it's like laying on your back and having 3 of your buddies lay on top of you. It's an amazing experience to go into space. And this is a video. I think hopefully the sound is working. This is what the space shuttle launch was like.
We're T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We have to go for ready to start. 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Shuttle Endeavour with NASA's final space station crew compartment that brings a bay window view to our celestial backyard.
So each of those 3 main engines on the shuttle, they burn hydrogen and oxygen, makes water as the exhaust. They're burning 1,000 pounds every second of hydrogen and oxygen. The 2 big white rockets you see on the side, the solid rocket motors, each of those is burning 10,000 pounds every second. So it's 23,000 pounds a second, 11 metric tons every second going out the back. So the gas mileage really sucks on a space shuttle, but the top end speed's pretty good. You go from 0 to over 17,000 miles an hour. I was talking about my Ford Mustang. You know, the acceleration is about the same for a few seconds, but you keep on doing that for 8.5 minutes. It goes pretty fast. If you've never had a chance to see a launch, the space shuttle was just amazing. There's this new rocket called SLS that has the same engines and same solid rocket motors, so it'll be kind of the same thing. A friend of mine, a baseball player, he went to the Super Bowl in Miami. It was the day that the Saints finally won. Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, that Super Bowl. So he went to the Super Bowl and then he drove up and he watched my launch. So we think he's the only guy that ever saw a Super Bowl and a space shuttle launch in the same day. But the speed of sound is only 1,000 feet a second, and he's probably 3 miles at least away. So it's about 15 or 20 seconds for the sound to get there. And there were some clouds that day, so you'll see nighttime turns into day when the flames come off the thing. But this is his home movie from 2010, what it's like to watch a shuttle launch.
Yes! Oh my God, this is unbelievable. Tucker, don't drop that. Oh my God. Holy crap.
Wow.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's so cool. Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
it's a pretty awesome experience. It's the proudest I've ever felt as an American was watching the space shuttle launch. So both of my flights on the shuttle and also with the Russians took me here to the International Space Station. I actually finished building it. We were the final assembly flight. And then when I went back with the Russians, I spent 200 days there. At the time, it was the second longest flight. Now there's a lot of flights that long. So anyway, so I spent a little over 7 months of my life here. It's an amazing spaceship. It was born in the 90s as a way to to keep Russian scientists from building nuclear bombs for the Iranians. And I think it worked well for a few years. That is obviously not working anymore. But it's a great place. It's a really cool place. I highly recommend it if you ever get a chance to go there. Highly recommend it. And I've had a chance to do this talk for National Geographic. I've been all around the country. I do speaking, at public events and corporate events. I could talk for hours just about my life in space, but one of the things I want to talk about was spacewalking. On my first flight as a shuttle pilot, that NASA didn't let pilots do spacewalks. Somebody had to land the shuttle, so they didn't want the pilots to float away. But now there's not really pilots anymore, especially with SpaceX and Boeing. Those are completely automated capsules. So even though there are test pilots up there, everybody's kind of in the same pool. So I was very fortunate. I had a chance to do 3 spacewalks on my last flight. It's an amazing experience. You're out there in this giant, bulky, couple 100-pound spacesuit. There's a little thin, millimeter-thick piece of plastic between you and instant death on the other side. It's an amazing experience to go out into the void. It felt like I was seeing creation from God's point of view. Like this was something that humans were not meant to see. And then I had to get back to work. I was plugging cables and laying cables and putting grease on bolts. Those were my 2 tasks. It was a really amazing experience. But my favorite thing to do in space was take pictures. There's some poor guy in Houston whose job is to count our photos, and when I got back, they told me I took the most ever pictures. They told me I took over 319,000 photos. So I'm gonna have to click fast to get through the pictures. But I like to start my home movie portion of my talk with this picture. I saw 23 different hurricanes and typhoons. They were all amazing, but this is MySAC. MySAC is by far the most amazing, biggest, most impressive typhoon. It was a Pacific March spring typhoon, the largest one ever. I helped make an IMAX movie called A Beautiful Planet, and there's a great video of us flying over. So that eye is just so big and well-defined. So you see this amazing storm. But if you look in the distance, this is kind of how you see Earth from the space station orbit. If you look at the top, there's that really super thin blue line. And that's our atmosphere. And all 11 billion humans, I think, in all of history since Adam and Eve, there's been 11 billion humans. Everybody is from that little super thin blue line. And nobody's ever been from above it. Unless you're in a spaceship or a spacesuit, you can't go above that blue line. So I came away from my space flights with a few kind of profound thoughts, but one of them was we have planet A and there is no planet B. Another thing that I've never seen from Earth is the Northern Lights. You guys probably saw, did you see them last week here? I saw them I was in Boulder for my daughter's graduation. I've never seen them from Earth other than like a little bit in Boulder last week. These are the Northern Lights, and you can see Earth because it's a full moon. So it's the middle of the night, but the moon is illuminating our planet. So you can see the snow there, and that's Norway and Denmark over Northern Europe. And they're just amazing. Our eyes are designed to work in black and white at night and color during the day, but you could still perceive that green color. You can perceive the red color, and it was amazing. It was just this kind of ghost that would show up. There's Moscow. The sun's radiation getting trapped by our magnetic field and being funneled down to the north magnetic pole. The south magnetic pole is even more amazing because it's not 180 degrees off, it's actually offset, which means the south magnetic pole, or the aurora australis, when the sun's active, is really close to the space station. The station actually flies through it sometimes. So it's an amazing experience to see the Northern Lights or Southern Lights. Anybody recognize this? Somebody was asking me, could you see Michigan from space? So you can't really see states. At nighttime in America, you see roads, and it's this big north-south, east-west grid, like America, this Eisenhower interstate system. But the Great Lakes makes it really easy to navigate your way around what you're seeing. This is like a June picture in the summertime. 99% of the, well, there's a little bit of white up there. There's a little bit of snow, but there's a lot of snow in this part. I don't know if you guys realize it, but it tends to snow a lot in this area. But Chicago, you can sort of see during the day. Detroit's obviously off there to the right, but the Great Lakes really show up very well. Really beautiful. This is the Galaxy. By the way, thank you to IMAX. They let me borrow a few clips from the movie. You can see the thin blue line there, and above it is that brown thing. And at nighttime, you can see super high atmosphere. This is a couple hundred miles above Earth. If you took your helmet off, you would die instantly, but there's a really super thin amount of atomic oxygen, so O instead of O2. There's nitrogen and some weird chemicals up there, but this is our galaxy, and I'm kind of an amateur astronomer. I know the basic constellations. I could never pick out any stars or any constellations. There's just too many. That's the center of our galaxy, and that's the moon reflecting on the ocean on the left. You could see planets from Mercury out to Saturn, which is really cool. To see, you really notice them by color, and they stand out. But stars, I could never pick out. There's just so many stars out there. It was an amazing experience to see these stars. This is the last picture I took. I remember I wanted to get one last starburst picture of the sun. I took it, I looked at the preview on the back of the Nikon camera, and I went, that's the best picture I'm ever taken in my life. I took the card out, downloaded it, and went down to the Russian segment and flew back to Earth. But there was a couple lessons I learned, and I'll talk about the environment in other speeches that I do. I won't talk about that today. But it was my 5th night in space, and we were flying over the Middle East, and I looked down, and I remember seeing Israel. We were going over the Mediterranean, and there's like, Israel's this little thing, and there's Lebanon and Jordan and Syria and the Nile and Egypt. They're all right next to each other, and I remember thinking, what's the problem, guys? There's this big Earth, and there's this little thing, so why are you doing that? And then as I thought about it, I realized that during the daytime, you don't see people. Unless you know you're looking for Chicago, then you can see some concrete, but you just don't see people during the daytime. You see them at night through lights. And after a few more days, it hit me that what I was seeing in lights is not population. I was seeing wealth. And what I was really seeing, it was politics. And this is not a real picture. This is a composite of a really high geosynchronous satellite. I didn't take this, but you can see the Earth at nighttime with no clouds. And if you look at Western Europe, there's a lot of lights up there. There's a lot of people up there. There's a lot of wealth up there. Western Europe's a pretty good system of government. If you look at Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of lights. There's a lot of wealth, but there's not a lot of people. I think there's only 20 million Saudis. It's just, not a lot. If you look at Africa, you can see the Nile River in the north. You see Nigeria in the west. Nigeria is an oil state. You see Johannesburg in the south. In between that, there's 1 billion people, and there are no lights. And so I never expected this, but I could see politics from space. The biggest one is Korea. I have a picture. I thought I was limited to 20 minutes. Now that George Conway's not here, I got a few extra minutes. But the North-South Korea distinction is profound. I mean, South Korea is this thriving, modern, super bright city lights. North Korea is just a black hole with a little white dot where Pyongyang is. But I didn't ever expect to see politics from space. And the reality is I'd much rather just talk about how are we going to land on the moon, and talk about this, how to fly the space shuttle, and the James Webb Space Telescope is amazing. That stuff is a lot more fun. But the reality is politics are important. Everybody in this room realizes that. And when I would do my talk, I retired from NASA about 7 years ago now, I would always say, man, it feels like the 1930s. Like the 1940s are not that far away. It feels like we're back in the 30s now because of the way things have been going. And the reality is it's 1942. Russia is on the march in Europe. Things are really bad down here. So we need to focus on getting these things right, because although space is really cool, I like talking about that, we all live down here. And unless we get this right, we're moving towards a bad place. I remember when I was a kid, I learned about manifest destiny. I'm sure we all learned about manifest destiny in American history or civics class. And that's this idea that America is destined by God to be number one, right? That's what they thought back in the 19th century, manifest destiny. There is no manifest destiny. America is not ordained to be the top dog forever, and no number one ever stays number one forever. Just ask the Yankees, you know. Ask Tom Brady and the Patriots. And unless we get our act together, China and Russia are gunning for us. They hate the rules-based international order. After World War II, America basically made the rules. You know, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the ICAO for aviation, the whole international rules-based order is really a Pax Americana. This is really an American system. And when you have leaders who are dictators for life, who want to make their country great again, who have a grudge, and they have some means to make that happen, bad things happen, and that defines Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. There's a really, like, some bad wind is brewing in a storm, and we need to just open our eyes. I feel like the whole West, after the Cold War ended, we kind of all, it said it's the end of history, Pax Americana is going to be forever, there's not any more threat. And folks, there's a threat. I was in space with lots of Russians, learned Russian, spent over a decade traveling to Russia. I loved my Russian colleague today was his birthday. We were texting each other. 3 of the cosmonauts that I was with in space, one of them we watched bombs going off in Ukraine in 2015 when Russia first invaded. 3 of these men and women that I was in space with have joined the Duma to support the war. So things, although we have had our head in the ground, let's ignore the threats, we're going to be number one. We're not going to be number one unless we get things right. So it's really a wake-up call, I think. And I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I kind of frame this thing as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I want to start off with the good. If you listen to certain news channels, you'll hear about this modern American hell and this, you know, American travesty, and we're all dying. I travel a lot. I fly somewhere every week. Every flight that I'm on is full. The airports everywhere are full. I'm sure a lot of people in here travel. You go to restaurants. The restaurants are full. The Mar's full. Like, America is a really great country. We don't have to make it great again. America is a great country. Just ask people. They vote with their feet. There's reason why there's millions of people trying to get here. We definitely need to fix our immigration system, but people want to come here because it's a great country. And there's not millions lined up to get into China. There's a lot of people lined up to get out of Russia, but they're not trying to go there. So we really need to know that, number one, first and foremost, we are a great country. But there is bad and ugly, and I want to talk about the bad. And the bad is we have a really broken political system. We all know that. That's why we're here. We just had a panel about that. But I think at the core of this political problem is that we're a rule-by-minority country. And a very small part of the electorate determines our policies. We were talking about ranked choice voting. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. We have partisan primaries, and so most elections are determined in the primary, and the kind of people that vote in the Republican primary are often extreme Republicans. The kind of people who go out and are motivated to vote in the Democratic primary are often extreme Democrats. And then when you get to the general election, you have to choose between these 2 people that you don't want. And the reality is you don't really get to choose most of the time. In 84% of congressional seats, the result was more than 10% in favor. In other words, in 5 out of 6 congressional races, it's a blowout. There's no question. Whoever wins the primary wins the thing. So we're really run by a House and a Senate, and in some ways a president, that are chosen by a really small percentage of us, and that's the extremists. We talked about the bell curve here a little bit. I was a math major, so I'm so excited to talk about the bell curve. We all learned about a bell curve in high school, right? Everything in life, most things, are formed by a bell curve. There's a fat part in the middle. Nikki Haley said it's between the 20-yard line. Somebody said between the 40. Most things are in the middle. There's the extreme right and extreme left, and those are small percentages. The average amount of snowfall in Michigan, the height of trees, the batting average of the Tigers, is pretty low, but it's basically a bell curve. I love Brad Ausmus was an Astro, and A.J. Hinch was an Astro too. But You know, everything in life is a bell curve, and I think our politics are the same. Most Americans want some form of gun control. They want to be able to own guns responsibly, but they don't want their kids getting mowed down. In Texas, our response to Uvalde was to make sure that all 18-year-olds can buy AR-15s and that anybody can conceal carry and open carry. It was perverted. That's what the Texas Republicans gave us. Most Americans believe in immigration. I mean, we're all immigrants. Even if you're a Native American, you're an immigrant. You came from Russia over the Bering Strait thousands of years ago. Everybody here is an immigrant from somewhere. Almost all Americans want some form of responsible immigration. Our political system doesn't let us do that. And so on and so on and so on. This presidential race that we have right now, 70% of Americans don't want it. Nobody wants a Biden-Trump rematch. I bet you if I took a poll, we would have no hands go up. They're really excited to see Biden-Trump rematch. And yet that's what the partisan primary system has given us. It's broken. It's not good. America used to be the envy of the world. I remember I speak French. I went and did this air show in Corsica, France, this little island where Napoleon was from. And I was in an F-16 at an air show, and this old man came up, and he was like, "You're American. You know, you landed on the moon." He was so amazed to see Americans. Another French businessman, super wealthy business guy. He's like, "Terry, I used to worship Ronald Reagan. America defended us. You saved Europe from tyranny. You guys are a disaster. WTF? What's going on there?" I teach at Harvard. I do a guest lecturing at Harvard Business School. It's probably 85% foreign. Trust me, guys, the American brand is not great again. It is really, really bad. The world is not impressed with what we're doing right now. Excuse me. It's dysfunctional. And this dysfunctional political system doesn't let us deal with really important issues like the debt. The debt is worse than China and Russia. Like, that's probably our biggest security threat for the long term. Social Security, both parties fall over themselves to make sure that we're going to have a Social Security train wreck. Like, they're guaranteeing that Social Security will explode one day because nobody's willing to deal with it because of the partisan primary. So we need to fix this political system so we can fix really important problems like not dying from debt and not letting Russia and China turn the world into an Orwellian nightmare. So we gotta fix this thing. And then I want to talk about the ugly, and this is really bad, but it's the division. We're living in the end of truth, this era that's the end of truth. I heard a podcast recently, somebody said, the last decade has been the stupidest 10 years in American history. And it's funny, but it's true. I remember, 20, 25 years ago, I remember thinking when Fox News first came out, and I loved it because it was fair and balanced. It was something different than the mainstream media, which is pretty left-wing. And I remember thinking, when I was a kid, everybody watched Walter Cronkite or everybody watched ABC or whatever. We all had the same set of facts, and then some of us were liberal, some of us conservative, but we all kind of had the same education, the same set of facts. Now we don't, man. If you watch Fox News, it is a pro-Trump. Biden is the devil. Biden needs to be completely destroyed if you watch Fox News. If you watch MSNBC, it's exactly the opposite. Trump is the devil. He needs to be destroyed. Our kids don't watch Fox News or MSNBC. They watch TikTok. The young kids don't get news from journalism. And whatever you think of journalists, I'm a big fan of journalism. At least they have ethics. There's a journalistic code. You have to be trained. There's some basic foundation of journalism before you write for the New York Times or Washington Post or NBC. Where our kids are getting their information from is not there. They're getting it from TikTok. So TikTok is owned by the Chinese. The Chinese Communist Party determines who owns TikTok. And they have these things called algorithms. Has anybody seen The Social Dilemma? If you haven't seen it, watch it. A lot of heads nodding. Watch that documentary. It came out a couple years ago. There's a reason why Amazon and Facebook and these companies are trillion-dollar companies, and it's because of algorithms. And these computer algorithms, they know what make you mad. If something makes you mad, you're going to click on it. You're going to watch it. And attention is everything. That's how they get their revenue. That's how they get to trillion-dollar valuations. So human brains cannot stand up against algorithms, especially, older people and younger people. And so we've created these amazing engines of economic ingenuity that are destroying ourselves. Like we've created the thing that's destroying ourselves. So that's a real problem. This end of truth, I think, is is something that we need to deal with flat on, because between algorithms and just being in your own echo chamber, it's not a good starting point to try and fix democracy. But I do think there are solutions that we can have. And the good news is America really is great. The bad news is we have a bad political system. The ugly truth is that there's this social media echo chamber that is kind of ending truth. But the best news, not good, bad, or ugly, but the best news is that there are things that we can do to fix it. One of the genius insights I think that our founding fathers had is that America's not chiseled in stone. It's a work in progress. We have amendments to the Constitution. We have state ballot initiatives. We have state legislature. You know, they were wise enough to know in 1789 they didn't get everything right. They got some things profoundly wrong. They allowed slavery to happen, our original sin that we're still paying for. But they knew that things would have to change with time. And so we can make changes. So I have some proposals for change. I had 5 ideas. Since George isn't here, I'll throw in a 6th. Some are low-hanging, some are really hard, and some are really, really, really hard. None of these are easy, but I think they can happen. But what we need to do is not keep on doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. Like, hope is not a strategy. In Ukraine, I'm a huge Ukraine fan. I could talk an hour and give a lecture about military and politics about Ukraine. But just hoping that Ukraine wins means Ukraine will lose, right? Hope is not a strategy. If you're in the military and you're ever getting a briefing and the commander ever uses the word hope, like, you need to defect and just run away because you're about to die. Hope is not a strategy. So let's not keep on doing the same things hoping for a different result. I think Einstein said that was the definition of insanity. The first one I'll talk about briefly is ranked choice voting. Of course, the folks here, Rank My Vote, are all about ranked choice voting. We heard about ranked choice voting. So I don't need to talk about it too much, but a really important component of ranked choice voting is the open primaries component, right? So right now we have partisan primaries. Republicans pick one Republican, Democrats pick one Democrat, whatever, and then the general you pick between them. In an open primary system, there's a lady named Catherine Gale who's kind of one of the ranked choice voting gurus. I highly recommend her book and her lectures and so on. She really advocates for top 5. I kind of think top 4 is good, top 5 is okay, whatever. The bottom line is in the primary, you got 10 names, you vote for who you want, and the top 4 or 5 vote getters go to the general election. So if you live in San Francisco, you're going to have 5 Democrats, right? If you live in whatever, Alabama, you're going to have a bunch of Republicans. You may not just have one from each party. It's the top vote getters. But what that does is it encourages candidates to appeal to the masses. And you gave a great example of how in Detroit, Michigan, the 7 black candidates didn't win just because they divided their votes. If they had this system, they all would have gone to the general election. Then in the general election, you rank order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the first round, you get to 50%, you win. If that doesn't happen, you give everybody their second place votes, add that first and second place votes up, you get to 50, you win. If nobody gets 50, you add your third place votes, and so on. What the open primaries and ranked choice voting does, it appeals to the broadest number of people. And I think we all understand that. Alaska does ranked choice voting. And in the last election, they have 2 senators, but only 1 Congress, only 1 House representative. Sarah Palin was running there. My guess, I don't want to be partisan, but probably not many of us would vote for Sarah Palin. She would have won had it been a traditional election. She didn't win because it was ranked choice voting. So that's a win for America. We don't need more Marjorie Taylor Greens or whatever in Congress. So ranked choice, that's one data point where it did win. It's not going to solve everything, but of all the actionable items there is to do, I think supporting organizations like Rank My Vote is really important. Unfortunately, about half the states have ballot initiatives. For you Michiganders, you're really lucky because you can get this on a ballot initiative and get that going. I'm in Texas, you can't do that. About half the states you can get ballot initiatives. Half states have to go through the legislature, which can be really challenging. Even though it doesn't support Republicans or Democrats, it supports broad appeal, and it punishes narrow-minded extremism, which is what we all really need. My second item, so ranked choice voting is first. My second item is term limits. And this is a really popular thing. And I will say I was at NASA for 16 years. So after 16 years, I knew everything. Like I knew everything about the job. I knew everybody in the organization. I knew how things worked. Everything was kind of easy. I hate this, that sounds smug. I knew everything. I talked to my boss, he's like, well, get back in line. Maybe in 5 years you can do the same thing again. 16 years was enough. I was ready to go do something else. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I want to do all these different things. Here's some statistics. We have 7 senators who are 80 or older this year. Only 40% of the Senate is under 60. 15 in the House are over 80. 4 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are 69 or older. Today, the average age of the House and Senate is 20 years older than what it was, 2 centuries ago. The Founding Fathers intended people to leave their jobs as farmers and lawyers and merchants, go do your public service, represent your community, and represent your community because you were just in your community and you know what it's like to be a farmer, and then go back to be a farmer. John Adams left his farm in Braintree, did battle, hated it, and went back to his farm, and he was happy. That's not what happened today. Joe Biden's been in this since Larry Hogan's dad was in Congress, right? That was not the intention. Also, when the Founding Fathers were around, I'm 56. If you were my age, I would have been dead by now, right? So they just did not intend for the House and Senate and Supreme Court to be a 50-year career. There's so many problems with that. And some people say, well, we have term limits. They're called elections. People can just vote them out. The reality is, for lots of reasons, that doesn't work. If we keep on doing the same thing, we're going to get the same solution, right? We can't expect a different result by keeping on things. So I think term limits is a good thing. My proposal, and I'd be open to whatever, I'd say an 18-year term limit for the House, Senate, and Supreme Court. That's 3 Senate terms. That's more than enough time to be good. 6 or 8 years is not enough time. You need some time to learn the lay of the land. If you're going to be a committee chairman, if you're going to be a Speaker of the House, whatever, I get it. You need some time. You don't need more than 18 years. And if you are going to stay past 18, you're going to stay for 50, and that's not healthy for democracy. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the poster child for this. For whatever it is, that when you get to be an 80-year-old politician, you think you have to do it, you're the only person that can do it. Or Dianne Feinstein being 90 years old and not allowing the Democrats to nominate any judges. The Supreme Court is 6-3 because Ruth Bader Ginsburg had to stick it out for another term, and she wasn't able to. So I think that's an important thing. If it was 18 years for the Supreme Court, every president would get 2 Supreme Court nominees, and there would probably very rarely ever be somebody who dies in office. And then there wouldn't be this sitting around waiting for someone to die or somebody to retire. Every president would get 2, and we would have a more normal Supreme Court. This requires a constitutional amendment. That's tough. You need 2/3 of the House and Senate, 75% of legislatures. You need all these people some of whom benefit from it. So the only way this would ever happen would be with a serious groundswell of public support. But I think it's something that we need to do. Campaign finance reform. I like all the easy things to do. Campaign finance reform, look, Citizens United from 2010 made this really tough, but the reality is it's really bad. There's billions of dollars that go into elections, as we all know. This is something that I think has to be addressed by Congress. We need a Supreme Court that's open to having some limits on it, because one of the main, back to that good, bad, and ugly, one of the main problems with bad is that people don't believe in our democracy, especially young people. And one of the main reasons they don't is because all this money and politics. This past fall, I spent a really hard look. I spent a few months thinking of running for office. And one of the main reasons I didn't is I'm not wealthy. I don't have money. I mean, it just requires money to run. In Maryland, I'm from Maryland. That's my home state. We just had these 2 Democrats running for the Democratic primary. Very super wealthy businessman put $60 million of his own money into the Senate race, and he almost won the primary just from buying it. That's not healthy when you can put $60 million into a race. Europe does some good things. They limit it. You can't have any, about 6 weeks before elections, all of a sudden there's all these posters in Switzerland and Germany and Norway. They all look the same. It's like, okay, there's the people, you vote, and then you move on with life. Then there's a very strict limit of how much you can spend. We need something like this because it really hurts the belief in our system that we have. My fourth item that I think is important is electoral college reform. As we know, we have the electoral college. What that has kind of degenerated in today is that Democrats have to win 53% of the popular vote in order to become president. It has given small states a grossly inordinate amount of power. Here's a statistic. In California, there's 718,000 citizens for every electoral college vote, 718,000. In Wyoming, there's only 192,000. So in Wyoming, your vote is almost 4 times more important than it is in California. That's not democracy. The electoral college is kind of like the old college football bowl system. Like, why are we doing that? In every sport, at every level, from age 5 to professional, there's a playoff system. Except for college football, we have this crazy thing. It's like in every election, in every country, in every system, you count the votes, whoever gets the most votes wins, except for the US presidential election. And there's reasons why we have an electoral college. None of them are good. It was to give small states in the South power so they could keep slavery. So it's not 1789 anymore. We don't need this system anymore. You can either fix that with a constitutional amendment. Republicans will never vote for it because today, in 2024, the electoral college system benefits Republicans. In the future, that may not be true. But it's something that I think, and again, the rest of the world, branding matters, and our brand is not good. They're like, why are you choosing your president that way? I think that's something that needs to change. My fifth item, another really easy thing to do, is a third party. I think the time is ripe. There's never been a time more ripe for some type of, not fringe with 2 people at the convention party, but an actual party that it could be a majority. Back when Ross Perot ran, it was roughly a third Republicans, a third Democrats, a third independents. This year, it's roughly a quarter and a half. Almost 50% of Americans are not Republicans or Democrats. People are fed up with Republicans and Democrats. Unless you're an extremist, you don't like it. I think the time has never been ripe. I'll also say that legitimate parties have debates. A legitimate party will debate, how are we going to handle tax policy? How are we going to handle immigration? Cults have witch hunts. I'm reading this book called Stasi-Land right now. It's really interesting about East Germany. They had these fantasies that everybody had to pretend were reality, but it wasn't true. They had to pretend like it was a democracy. There was no democracy. You had to vote for, like the Russian elections, right? That's not a democracy. You knew Putin was going to win, but you had to pretend it was a democracy, and you had to pretend that there was no unemployment. There's no unemployment in the DDR, even though there was lots of unemployment and underemployment. In the GOP today, you have to pretend that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. It's a thing. A friend of mine, he could be here tonight, a very smart businessman, wanted to run for Congress in Northern Virginia, in Alexandria, as a Republican. He's a reasonably conservative guy. The party chairman came to him and said, if you want to run, you have to go to Mar-a-Lago. You're going to get an interview, and the first question in the interview is, did I win the 2020 election? And unless you say, yes, sir, you won the 2020 election, you get no Republican thing. Healthy parties have debates. Cults have witch hunts. And this Republican Party of today, for whom I stuffed envelopes when I was in high school for Ronald Reagan, that party's gone. It's gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's a cult. And I think once you fall off the cliff, it's really hard to climb back up the cliff. And so I think that party needs to be torn apart. And moderate conservatives and moderates need to have their own party. I think it would grow, it would explode. There's such an appetite for it now. Everybody says that's impossible. It's something that can't happen, but I think it is. The one, number 6, that I had taken off for time, but I'll say it real quick. Gerrymandering is awful. Many states have it. I'm from Maryland, one of the worst Democratic gerrymandering in the world. There's 8 House seats. There's maybe 1 Republican or 0. Illinois, Democrats have ruined. Republicans have ruined lots of states. Tennessee, Texas, it's very racist. It's very anti-democratic, but gerrymandering is a thing. In Michigan, you guys fixed it, so congratulations. I think you need some type of bipartisan system to fix that, but gerrymandering is another one of the 6 things. So in closing, like I said, I would much rather stand here and talk about space. We can do some Q&A about space if you want. But politics is how you affect lives on Earth. That's how we get things done down here. And we got to get our politics right. If things were clicking along great, I would be off doing other things. But they're not, and we need to get this fixed. One of my philosophies when I was an Air Force officer, when I was at NASA, I've moved around a lot of different jobs. And whenever I was in a job, I always wanted to leave it better than when I left. When I was a flight commander, when I was a scheduler, I was the chief of robotics at NASA. I always wanted to leave that job better than when I left. And that's what I want to do now with America. I want to leave America better than when I found it, when I was growing up. The group in this room are the kind of people who want to leave America better than when we got here. I have kids. I now have a grandbaby. I want things to get back to be better for her than what they were. So let's end this bad and the ugly and get back to the good, because our children and our grandchildren depend on it. So with that, we can do Q&A. I don't know, how are we doing on time?
I think we're a little over on time, so instead of Q&A collectively, I think you'll probably be sticking around for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'll stick
so
around, yeah.
If people want to chat with Terry, feel free. But that concludes the program this evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. If you're interested in I hope all of you will come to the summit in February. It'll be towards the end of February in D.C. We'd love to see you there. I think there will probably be, ask Chris, you can talk to Chris Roosen about more events in Michigan. I think we're talking about Grand Rapids maybe later in the year, but certainly going to try to continue to do this around the state and also around the country. But would just love to meet you and welcome you into the Growing Principles First tent, because it's growing pretty quickly. But thank you. Have a great evening and safe travels back to wherever you came. Thanks.